Hi, I'm Tom Farmer. A question that comes up frequently, especially during years when there's high inflation, consumer inflation, is the question of whether a company has an obligation to keep employees whole with the rising cost of living. And I want to address this in everyday terms. So I'm not just talking to HR people or compensation specialists like myself. This is also just for everybody to consider. The question of inflation really, my first thought is, should pay rise with inflation? No. Here's why. This doesn't sound very nice. It sounds a little harsh, but people live where they live. Some people can choose to move. For some people, maybe it's not possible. But generally speaking, inflation is part of where you live, just like taxes, the cost of housing, the quality of education, the weather. So if you're unhappy with the whole situation where you live, you can move. Does an employer have to uh, take account of those things and make you, always keep you whole? No, it's not the company's obligation. The company has an obligation mainly to its customers and to its employees and to the shareholders, and trying to balance these. Inflation doesn't really figure in as a primary goal. Primary goal. Okay, that's number one. It's not the company's problem, it's your problem. Number two, when inflation is zero, nobody demands that their pay be tied to inflation. Did you know that in Singapore, for the 5 years prior to the pandemic, there was no inflation? Zero. But nobody in Singapore demanded that their pay be tied to inflation because they would have had no raise for 5 years. It's only when inflation is higher than what companies are planning to give as raises that people say, hey, you should pay me for inflation, but not when inflation is low, only when it's high. We don't really pay for the cost of living anyway. A family of five definitely has a higher cost of living than a single person would have, right? But companies don't set pay based on family size, do they? The cost of anything generally depends on the supply and demand for it. This is true for talent. Talent in high demand, like cybersecurity or nurses, they get paid more when there is lower supply and higher demand for their skills. It's the pay for nurses has nothing to do with the supply and demand of hamburger, fuel, and movie tickets. So how do we set salaries? Here's how we do it. We grade the job, first of all. We pay first for the job based on the responsibilities, the scope, the decision-making, impact, complexity, and other considerations. Then we look at the external value of the job in the market. We look at compensation surveys published by reputable survey publishers like Mercer, Willis Towers Watson, Aon, or Korn Ferry. We look at the going salary out in the market for a specific job title like quality manager or registered nurse. The surveys give us the going rates in the market. That's where we generally try to benchmark our surveys. It's hard to justify as a business paying more than other companies are, but it's makes no sense to pay less because nobody will want to work for you. So companies try to aim pretty much at the middle of the market pay levels externally. That's called benchmark. And we also benchmark what other companies are budgeting for pay increases each year. Third, we look at the skills, track record, qualifications, other kinds of contribution or value that a person brings to a company, and decide where to pay that individual within a salary range that is established for that job or that job's pay grade. And finally, we adjust salaries at least once a year, considering changes in market supply and demand, but also each employee's performance, increased skills, their impact on the company's performance, their contribution, and those types of factors. Honestly, we ignore consumer inflation. So there you have it, the reasons not to pay for consumer inflation, but also a little bit about how we actually do it in real companies around the world. Okay, good luck.